Ukraine has destroyed this second key bridge in the Kursk region. Can you tell us about Ukraine's actions and their strategy here?
Yeah, good morning. Well, the Ukrainian offensive has been slowing down somewhat. This is a natural part of every offensive like this, where they start outrunning their logistics and the enemy recovers from its shock to respond. So we are seeing the advance slow down. These two bridges that have been dropped to the west of the Ukrainian offensive area, these could just be about securing the Ukrainian flank, although they may wish to move into that area to expand the size of any potential buffer area that President Zelensky mentioned.
And Zelensky spoke overnight. What did he have to say about this?
Well, President Zelensky, I think, has provided some really interesting clarity. He discussed the buffer zone, as you mentioned in the report. He also mentioned two other really important points. Firstly, the destruction of as much of Russia's war-making potential as possible. Ukraine is part of that, but not exclusively about that. There's other areas, including strikes on energy infrastructure, that are part of that. But he also talked about reinvigorating what's going on in Western political systems, about going to support Ukraine and Ukraine winning what he called a just war. So there's a political dimension to what's going on in Kursk. It's about ensuring the West continues to support Ukraine in its fight and, if possible, lift some of the restrictions that it's placed on the application of Western weapons in Russia.
And speaking of, is Ukraine performing this incursion, undertaking it with or without the key equipment from Western allies, particularly the US?
It's using a lot of Western equipment. It's using American armoured vehicles and artillery. It's using Western main battle tanks from places like Canada and Germany and other countries. So it's using a whole range of assistance that's been provided by it. And countries like Canada have come out and been very explicit. We're happy for the Ukrainians to use our equipment inside Russia.
How is Moscow reacting to this?
Well, as we've seen in a few of these crises during the war, Putin is very slow to respond. He's a bit of a procrastinator and hasn't been quite sure how to respond to this shock incursion onto Russian territory. He's been shown to not be able to defend Mother Russia in front of all the Russian people. He's put the FSB in charge of responding to this, which is a very curious response. Having an intelligence organisation in charge of a military operation is probably not a good guarantor of success.
And the point has been made that this incursion, which began almost 2 weeks ago, would have been months in the making at a time when Donald Trump was looking like a near certainty to take the US election. What do you think of that? And does that give a better context here in terms of this so-called exchange fund that Zelensky speaks about?
Well, what the Ukrainians did was keep this very, very close to their chest. They saw that the counter-offensive in 2023 was compromised for many reasons, but one of them was the lack of security in where it would take place, when it would take place, how it would take place. So this time they've exercised deception and operational security very cleverly, and it's led to a fabulous surprise for the Russians. In the US, the impact of this operation is yet to be seen, but it certainly put it back on the front pages. It certainly will make it something that both Harris and Trump will have to consider in their support for Ukraine moving forward, because ultimately this offensive has changed the trajectory of the war. Ukraine has seized the initiative, and it's up to the West now to support that or not.
And Mick, Belarus says Ukraine has stationed 120,000 troops along its border. It's sending troops in response to that. Now, Belarus, an ally of Russia, do you believe those numbers? And what are your thoughts on these claims?
Well, Ukraine's had troops stationed on its northern border right from the beginning of the war, when it kicked the Russians out in that direction. It's had to have troops there because this is where the Russians invaded from originally. They know Belarus is a potential axis of advance for future Russian invasion. So they've prudently kept troops there. There is no intention of the Ukrainians, from what we can see, to go into Belarus. Even if they did, they would make short work of what is a pretty small and pathetic Belarusian military. So Lukashenko is really just stirring the pot here. Ukraine isn't interested in picking a fight with another country.
Mick Ryan, thank you for joining us this morning.